Welcome to another session. This is the 5th show of Positive Live, and I'm very happy to be able to present to you all today Dr. Tammera Karr. Wave your hand, Tammera. And Kathleen Bell. And they're here to talk about their new upcoming book, as well as an online class that they are offering. So let me tell you a little bit about Positive Live if you're new. This is a show that we have conversations regarding mind, body, spirit, environment, and energy, and all positive things that uplift in those areas. And I love to touch base with people, whether they're professionals or laymen, and to hear the latest news on all of these topics. And I'm hoping that there's a little something for everybody, and take what you like and then ponder maybe what you're not so sure about. I also want you to know that we are live, so we have guests that are willing to sit in and ask questions when the time comes. This is also recorded, so for family and friends, you can check us out on my YouTube channel, Positive Live with Jan Boal. And I'm excited to also announce the new launch of my one-on-one services called Empowering Guide for your physical and spiritual health. This is something new that I'm doing one-on-one. For the past decade, I've been providing these services in workshops, and now I'm going to do it one-on-one. And you can check it out on janboal.com, or you can email me at jan at janboal.com. And with that, let's take it away. So I loved what I've probably gotten at least halfway through Empty Plate. And what Empty Plate and what these two gals will be talking to us about is about mindful eating and sustainability. Right up my alley. So I'm very, very happy about this. So tell us what, when do you expect this book to come out, and what got you involved in this?
Well, our publication date is November 1st. Selected that date for my son's 35th birthday. And we are right on track to have that available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, in all of the college catalogs for the student nurses to be able to access. And what got us started? Well, that would be Kathy. This is all Kathy's fault. In 2013, after a presentation, she said to me, "You need to do a class for nurses on nutrition." And in 2015, she said it again. And I think she said it every year that I have known her. And so last year, I invested in getting my website so that I could do online education and provide continuing education credits. I've applied for various places as well as the Oregon Holistic Nurses. And Kathy has just been back there with her little buggy whip, tapping me in the back of the head, going, "Do it, do it, do it." So when it came time to actually write the book, you know, most people write a book and develop a course. I did it backwards. I called her up and said, "Well, you know, you started this, now you're going to help me with it, right? Because I don't have any experience to write about meditation and mindfulness in one of the chapters." And she said yes, and so I'm thrilled.
And I was very thrilled to get the call. And Tam's account is pretty accurate. We've known one another for about 7 years, mostly through her collaboration with the Oregon Holistic Nurses Association. And Tam knows that I've been a teacher of many things, and I keep telling her she needs to teach this, besides talk about it, besides being good at it, besides practicing it as a professional, she needs to teach it. And my preferred audience has always been the nurses, who I think our nursing education has become deficient in nutrition. And certainly I don't have much to say about most of the medical education. I have an ex-husband who's a doctor, so I went to school with him. And he got nothing in the way of nutrition. And more and more and more in this century, we're finding that nutrition is the basis for cure. And that's not news. Florence Nightingale, hundreds of years ago, knew that that was true. And when Florence was a nurse, nurses were responsible for nutritional assessment, nutritional planning with their patients. When I was in school 45 years ago, we were the same. But that focus in nursing has shifted. And so I was very, very happy to be able to contribute to a book that's dedicated to changing not only what the public thinks about nutrition and how we view our choices, but professionals and most especially nurses. So we're in it together.
Absolutely. And I could not agree with you more. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've been an avid researcher myself as far as nutrition and what I allow my family to eat. I've done organic for years, grown my own food. I met both of you at the Oregon Holistic Nurses Association, and it was so wonderful to be with like-mindedness. And yes, diet is number one. I think between our home environment and what we put, we are what we eat, and what we also live in, and that is, I think, a big foundation of our whole structure. And I really like how you bring science into this, and about the blood types and about the culture, because yeah, I just loved it.
Well, and you said you've read the whole book, but I know I didn't send you the whole book, so you're going to be surprised by later chapters, I think, because we have a whole chapter on what happens with music and sound and noise, color, the colors of foods, which fall into the Asian belief systems as well as many other cultures. And we talk about time and nature. It's so important for people to be able to get out. And so oftentimes people who live in metropolitan areas, it might be just their community park or a small green space. Portland is one of those areas that has a lot more green space than San Francisco or Chicago or other locations. And, you know, and if somebody has chronic illnesses, it's hard for them to get out into nature. I have a 65-year-old client that has all kinds of health problems, migraines. She's very light sensitive, sound sensitive. And we have seen a real improvement in her mental well-being, her sleep patterns from being in a nature-filled environment that she didn't have available to her before. And then when we look at the history of food, there's so much conflicting information out there that's talking about, oh, we have to eat keto, we have to eat paleo, we have to eat this way, that way, everything must be vegetarian. Yet when we really look at those, they're opinions. And there's not always a lot of science to support those opinions and historical information. So I've got a small, tiny micro collection of nursing textbooks from the 1920s and 1900s. And it's fascinating at how much information on nutrition is in those books that as part of my normal world, part of my colleagues' normal world, but it's not part of the normal world for our nurses when I talk with them. And the other thing that really inspired this book was Jan and Kathy and I were at the Holistic Nurses Conference in October of last year, and they began with an opening ceremony. And I was stunned by the words shared by the nurses about what they wanted to get out of the event. You know, in many respects, it was depressing listening to y'all talk about how exhausted and tired and burned out and everything you were. And so that's why this book is dedicated to nurses, because you give so much 24/7 to people. And oftentimes you forget to fill your own bucket. And that's a challenge for women in general, but you put on the nurse's cap and it makes it even worse. And so we can't give what we don't have. And we talk about sustainability in this book as far as sustaining our health, not about environmental issues, but those things that are necessary to sustain our health and to sustain the next generation. And then we're going to open up the last chapter. I'm going to introduce you to regenerative health, because that's really the next step for all of us, is not just to sustain the status quo, but to go to the next level where we regain that health, those healthy DNA, those healthy responses and balanced brain chemistry. We want to go the next level, not just hang out at status quo of sustainability. And Kathy is providing some phenomenal tools to help the nurses do that in her chapter.
And one of the things that's my contribution is the idea of balance, because our systems of health have never been based on the concept of balance. So in each of our chapters, we're pulling out principles or basic concepts that are kind of buried in the chapter, in the text. And my chapter on mindfulness is all based on balance, whether I talk about the Ayurvedic health system, which is a 6,000-year-old system of thinking about health, or whether I talk about traditional Chinese medicine, or whether I talk about indigenous practices who were never separated from nature. Man is the only creature in nature that even thinks it might be separate from anything. Okay, so it doesn't matter which other system I'm pointing to. I'm pointing to the fact that in general, we have lost the idea of balance, and especially what Tom said, I have to echo, nurses. And one of the reasons that I joined the American Holistic Nurses Association, I'm looking, when was that? In the year 2009 or 10, at least 10 years ago, was because their entire tenet is self-care and balance, because you can't, like Tam said, give from an empty bucket. If we don't provide the scientific evidence to the nurses and the education on how to bring balance to themselves, we're all in like self-destruct mode. Okay, and the nurses study, that's the Framingham Heart study that nurses were part of, I'm just not really embarrassed, but more personally kind of devastated to tell you that, on balance, nurses aren't doing so good at this for themselves. And in order to be able to do that giving, we have to bring that back to nursing. And that's really what I teach now in the program that the American Holistic Nurses Association has organized called IHAP, the Integrative Health Arts Healing Program. We spend all of our time educating nurses. So, I feel sometimes like a broken record, just over and over and over and over. I don't really think that we're saying, most of the things we're saying aren't brand new, but I think the way that we're putting them together may be. And hopefully that's the idea of the synergy of this partnership in the book.
I think we're bringing some clarity to some ideas too.
Your picture.
I'm sorry, two people were talking at once.
There's a bigger picture that we can see when you combine the two. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Add something. This is Lila, Kathy's friend in Cannon Beach. And there's two questions I had for you. And one is, years ago in the 80s, there was a Region 10 Northwest nursing group that put together protocols for people to do assessments. My primary interest is in public health, so it's public health. And there was a whole section on nutrition, so that it was an assessment component and then what you would do about it. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. And the other thing I wanted to say, as you were commenting about, this is not about environment, but here's a book. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see it?
Yeah.
And it's about nursing health and the environment, because I used to be the environmental health director for Multnomah County. And the relationship between food and the environment is huge.
Truly.
So it would be great if that was somehow
Right.
articulated. And
There
with that,
is.
I'm done.
There's going to be a ton of that. I am very blessed to live with and work with soil scientists and botanists and wildlife biologists. And so when Kathy and I talk about what's in water, as boring as it might be, we're going to have the names of those chemicals in water and what they do to you. When we talk about symbiotic relationships in the soil and how that develops the nutrients in the grasses that the herbivores are feeding and leads towards healthier herbivores and us in turn healthier. So when we're talking about sustainability, we're not talking about it from an environmental avenue of a particular agenda. We're talking about the environment of what creates a healthy, sustainable environment from the soil, the water, the air, the food that we eat and consume. So, I mean, there's going to be plenty of that. We're averaging right about 100 to 150 new scientific references per chapter, and we have 6 chapters. So we're trying to make sure that we've not only covered the science, but we've answered a lot of those questions too.
And Lila, since you showed that lovely book, will you please send me the author and the reference for that? And I will happily take a look at it.
Me too.
I'll just lend it to you, and then you can see if it fits your paradigm.
Perfect, thank you. And just one more thing to, kind of piggyback on what Lila said. I do believe that nutrition education and the idea of nursing practice, including nutrition, used to be more common than it is now. And we've lost it. It's just gotten pushed out of nursing curriculum and nursing practice, partly because our medical culture is so segmented and specialized, and we have nutritionists and we have, people whose dietitians, people whose profession focuses on food versus nursing. And in education, we have lost the focus on nutrition altogether. One of the questions that Jan gave me in this, idea of preparing for the call today was what got me personally interested in nutrition. And this was as a nurse, because I was teaching childbirth education. Before I was a midwife, which I practiced as many years as a nurse midwife, in my childbirth education classes, everybody wants to know what's the best food to eat when you're pregnant, because your body is building a person. You are building a person every single day with what you eat. And that's a pretty important job. And that's really where I started to pay attention in a different way to nutrition. And that just kind of, that was the 70s. So that just kind of continued through my nursing career. I never lost that as a point of focus, whereas, in the time that I've spent as nursing faculty, I don't find it to be a point of focus anymore. And so when I met Tam, I just kind of embraced her with open arms and said, you're the one who has to come talk to the nurses.
So in answer to that question,
Yeah, I feel it's very. Go ahead, Tammera.
What got me started in nutrition is the same story that is there for almost every one of my holistic nutrition colleagues. Somebody you love needs help. And so I had had a great aunt that introduced me to herbology and nutrition when I was 14 years old. And I kind of put the book aside, forgot about it. Then I got married, and my husband wasn't in as good a health as he should have been for as young as he was. And so that started it, helping him to be healthier. And then the next thing I knew, here I am over 20 years later as a practicing clinician that learned a lot. All of the stuff I thought I learned in school was nothing compared to what I learned when I went into clinical practice. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what I wanted to share when I wrote my first book, Our Journey with Food, with my colleagues that are holistic nutritionists, is I wanted to fill in the gaps for them. And so this became the start of the journey, and we're in our second edition, and going to be doing the third edition next year. It's time to start on. And then the next thing I knew, the faculty at the schools like Hawthorne and the schools in Portland, they said, we need more. We need more. And Kathy was like, you need to give me some recipes. You keep talking about food, but you don't give anybody recipes. And so then I found myself writing this book. And from this book, I did this in about 40 days, which just drives people crazy. But it's a lot easier to write a cookbook than it is some other things. And I had a lot of fun with history.
I can't see the title. Can you read the title?
It's Our Journey with Food Cookery Book. And it looks like it's reversed. That's interesting. You guys are all seeing it reversed. And with this one, I got to pull in a lot of history also.
Right.
Yep.
We see it okay.
It comes through okay on our end.
Okay. So with this one, I got to really dive into traditional foods. I grew up with Basque, I grew up with Irish and Germans, and then Kathy's got all of this wonderful experience from her grandparents that we're getting to learn about too, and how those generational connections of food really answer the calls of our DNA. They are what make us who we are. I've seen people have panic attacks and sprint from rooms because of the smell of a particular food causing war flashbacks. And I've seen other people break into tears because for the first time, this tasted like something their grandmother made, because they did something simple like crushing the garlic and letting it air instead of just mincing it and throwing it into a dish. So this is a way for us to reconnect people to their history, to their people, to their culture, as well as feed their DNA so that they can just not just sustain, but regenerate their life.
Absolutely. I was very pleased about hearing about all the culture behind it, and because with our past generations, everything was whole foods and it was handmade. And there's something about having your hands in and creating something yourself and feeling it and smelling it and breaking bread, and which I'm sure both of you know with your travels and myself. I mean, I would love to be able to live in other countries where mealtime is spent.
We just lost you, Jan. I cannot hear you.
You're unmuted now, Jan.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Yeah,
Yes.
There was something that came through, sorry. What I enjoyed so much about with traveling and mealtime was how much it's reverend and it's a family time, and they take advantage of that. It's not like, okay, here's 15, 20 minutes, let's hurry up and eat, and then we're on our way and kind of go over the topics of the day. It's a real breaking of the bread and being there. Talk about being mindful and being present. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
You know, and you're absolutely right. That's something we've completely lost in our culture in America that other cultures in Italy and Spain and Portugal and South America haven't lost, is that coming together for the meal. That's something we've done since the very beginning of time. We've eaten together. We ate together because of security. We ate together for comfort. And it's very much hardwired into us. In South Korea, there are individuals paid over $10,000 a month to have a virtual meal with somebody else, a woman who talks with you and slurps her soup and has a conversation through the computer screen. That's how disconnected even we've become in our own cultures that did come together beforehand. And we digest food better when we're together. We slow down, we have a conversation, we don't just wolf everything that we're doing. And I love that you mentioned putting the hands in the food. There was a delightful movie I saw years ago about the emotions of the cook were transferred into the food and affected everybody who ate it. And I really think there's something to that. Food that's made from grandmother that loves you, and she's putting extra effort into that pie or into that pasta or whatever it is, it always tastes different. We joke about my mother-in-law. Her hamburgers, I don't know what she did. We could never figure out what she did. It was hamburger out of the same cow, but her hamburgers, hands down, always tasted better than anything I came up with. We finally said it had to be the hand lotion. That was the only thing we could find she did that I didn't do, you know? But it was also a way that she flavored because she cared for her family, because she loved what she was doing. It was a simple meal. And that's huge. That's huge for all of us. It changes our brain chemistry. It changes how depressed we feel. It changes our digestion. It changes all of those microbiome responses that otherwise get shut down from these things that we don't do anymore.
And we actually, in the mindfulness chapter, in chapter 3, I'm not sure if you got all the way to chapter 3, Jan, but in chapter 3, we do talk about the science behind this. Just what Tam said, it changes your brain chemistry. So sitting down, taking a pause, taking a breath, bringing something deliberately to mind, putting other things deliberately aside in your mind, in your presence, in your body. Every single one of those activities causes chemical, biochemical change in the body, differences in the physical reaction, which means differences in both the feelings about the food, the memories about the food, the actual physical processing of the food. Food that we ingest is absolutely miraculous because it becomes a part of us. It becomes cellular. It becomes food for more food to make more cells. And in this way, and Tam's research on this is great, and it was the premise of her first book that I loved, is that your cells carry the memories of your ancestors. And part of that is what they ate. And you're doing that right now for your body as it moves through the aging process, and for the children that you may or may not have produced and or fed on the planet. Okay, so all of it is this amazing circle of life, which no part of it is disconnected from anything. And it's my real hope that by the end of the book, what we've drawn, again, the whole, yin and yang balanced circle, that we've drawn this full circle to say, yes, you are what you eat. Your grandmother told you that. Why didn't you pay attention? And at the end, it's still important to realize that we're all what we eat. And what is it we're eating? That's the middle of the book.
And Kathy does a fantastic job of going into our consumption. I know, Jan, you mentioned it earlier. Our consumption isn't just the food we consume. Our consumption is the water we drink, the air we breathe, the sounds we listen to, the environment that we live in, what we're bringing in through our eyes. The reaction of what happens when light enters our eyes is so profound that in animals like elk, when the light begins to change and it passes through the retina of the eye, it stimulates the hypothalamus to put the animal into rut. And so light is incredibly powerful. Color is incredibly powerful. These are all things that we're consuming that are all around us. And many people aren't even paying attention to what that part of their consumption is.
So Tam, could you talk a little bit more about how people hire somebody to slurp with them? Like, what country is that, and how did they come upon that, and what are the outcomes?
It's in South Korea, and is where it's happening. There's one particular woman, she gets $10,000 a month, and they put up the the computer screen or the laptop or whatever at the table, and one individual is eating and she's eating on the other side, just like we're doing with Zoom, and she has a conversation with them. And in Korea, slurping is considered good manners, and you know, that's what they're doing. So part of the Asian cultures is really into anime and that kind of technology, but they also, the research is showing that that's a way for people to address being isolated. They go home, they don't have anybody there, and they're willing to pay somebody to eat a meal with them over the computer because that's their only connection. And connection is something we've all become much more acutely aware of because of COVID. Those people who I know that are painfully shy, that their only engagement with other people was going to the workplace, and how they've been struggling with depression during this time because of not having that connection. So it was a research done out of South Korea. And I first read about it in B. Wilson's book that came out last year that's called Why We Eat What We Eat. Fascinating journey that she made. She's out of Great Britain, and tons of information in that book about things like that. Watching video of somebody eating.
Well, being a psychiatric
setting the
nurse,
family-
I provide a lot of education. I provide a lot of education for my mentally ill patients in regards to diet, and I've even done classes, and it's made a huge difference. And I think for a lot of the population, they think that eating healthy costs more, but it doesn't really. When I would do cost breakdown, if you look at like a bag of apples as opposed to a bag of chips, that bag of apples is going to get you a lot farther and be a lot better for you, and you're going to feel so much better than just the bag of chips. So we provided our own kind of little cookbook and menu ideas to come up with that they can make other meals out of with the leftovers. And it was all good, wholesome food. And they were very surprised at their budget and also how they felt better. Yeah, they have better energy. They're not going to feel sluggish.
Well, and it's not just sluggish, it's how it affects brain chemistry. We know that omega-3s are critical for brain chemistry in some individuals, how those neurotransmitters are formed through nutrients, the B vitamins, B12's role, vitamin D's role. Vitamin D is converted into estrogen in the brain. We have more hormone receptor sites in our brain than anywhere else as women. And so as women go into perimenopause and menopause, what is one of the chief complaints? I've got a foggy head. I can't think straight. And then the next one is my hair is falling out. So, you know, there's so many things that happen to women in the United States when they go through those life transitions that doesn't happen anywhere else.
Right.
But now as the Nestle's and the Coca-Cola and the General Mills are moving into these other countries, we are now seeing these kinds of responses happening in women that didn't have challenges with menopause and life changes before. So if you don't feed your body, your brain's not going to work very good.
I have a question about the DNA repair. So I have hemochromatosis.
And you can rejuvenate yourself.
Yeah. So I have hemochromatosis, which is supposedly a condition like that gets turned on. And so what I'm trying to do is turn it off. So I'm finding it through diet that oftentimes eating the wrong things has stressed my body to a point of creating other things and on and on. And like hemochromatosis is just a dumb syndrome. I have too much iron. Everybody in the world would love to just be sitting next to me because I have 50% more iron than everybody else in the room, I guarantee.
Right.
And there's absolutely nothing to do about it. They say to control it with nutrition. No, you can't really. Can you control this? But
there are a couple of things, Christy, you can do. There's two things in particular. Black tea consumption inhibits ferritin uptake and helps to reduce iron absorption. And whey protein helps to do that also. So those are two foods that help to suppress iron absorption. Staying away from cast iron is part of the question, but you also have to look at those foods like strawberries and watermelon, because not only do they contain the iron, they also are very high in vitamin C. And when you put the two together, you end up with a food that's great for people like me that are low in iron constantly, where you need to go the other way around. So there are foods that help to pull iron out of your system. There are chelating agents that we call vitamins that help to bring that out. Fiber helps to bring it down. So there, I believe as a nutritionist, there are things that you can do proactively to bring it down besides just phlebotomy. Now,
Well, I've had to do it. I've had to figure it out myself. I figured the black tea out. So I was drinking tea before and after every meal as a way to basically inhibit the absorption of the iron and probably other nutrients as well. But I had to just kind of like nutritionally figure this out because my primary medical doctor didn't really know what to tell me. The specialist was just more concerned on if I had anything catastrophic like a heart or my liver going bad or whatever. So if you're in between, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of help. So I'm interested to see if your book has some things in there that will kind of help me, because it is about the balance. Like I just have to keep myself in between.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
and I think when you look at, Kathy has done a fantastic job of bringing in some balance on views. You know, some people are opposed to learning about any of the Asian practices because they think it might be at odds with their belief system. And she has brought in information on how each of these belief systems has meditation as part of it. And then when you look at what she's written about Ayurvedic foods and how they address the doshas, that's not new. As she said, it's 6,000 years old, and it's mirrored in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. And if we look at other cultures, we find that there's that kind of stuff at play also. So I'm of Irish ancestry, Scots Irish ancestry. And when I look at the foods that grew wild in Scotland and Ireland and northern parts of Great Britain, and I started bringing those more back into my diet, asparagus, the collard greens, it was interesting how I went from having some pretty significant health challenges to, with giving myself some time, within 3 years, I have normal blood pressure, my energy is fantastic. And now when I have a funk day, I know exactly what I didn't do that I need to do and can go in and fix it. So, but that's, you know, we have to give our bodies time to regenerate. And hemochromatosis is one of those things that you've got to teach your body, your liver, how to handle iron. And it
Right.
may be you're missing a key essential mineral that normally binds and chelates iron that's not in your diet.
And Christy, as far as you having to figure it out on your own, you're absolutely right. And I'm sad to tell you that that's the truth, but you're absolutely right, because to go back into what Ayurveda teaches, and that is that it doesn't matter, you know, there's no one right way. You can't be all vegetarian or all animal based or all paleo or whatever. The idea is that you learn about your own body, and Ayurveda has words for this like dosha, but everybody's body is a combination of the same 5 elements that make up everything on the planet. Plants, animals, grass, your body, my body, we're all made of the same things. It's just that the combination is different and unique in each of us. And if you learn about your own dosha or your own combination, then you learn what balances it out, what kicks it down, like Tam says, she's figured out between her vitamins, and especially vitamin D and iron and whatever, she's figured out what happens is that if she starts tipping over in one direction over here, then she goes back mindfully and pays attention to what her choices were, what she did, what she didn't do, and decides, well, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And now what I need to do is try to restore this to balance. But there's also, you know, you can tip over this way. And the idea is that you begin to feel this intrinsically, and your cells have their own innate intelligence to tell you this. You know when you're off, and you also know when you're getting better. And this, Dr. Deepak Chopra, who is my own personal guru and many things, tells you that instead of the idea that we need to take care of our bodies, we need to listen and allow our bodies to take care of us. And what my body is going to say is going to be different than Jan's, and different than Lila's, and different than Tam's, and different than yours. But what your body tells you to be and do and feel about you is going to be perfect for you.
Absolutely. And I think also what's very important is when you say to listen. And in order to listen, we have to be still, and we have to be quiet. We have to be mindful, and we have to be aware. And I think that is so important. It's to not just keep shoveling the food in and we're busy, 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 busy. You know, we are human beings, not human doers. And I think part of that whole practice of sitting down and taking that time with eating is vital to our good health. Absolutely.
I was just looking at a study this morning that I sent over to Kathy about the value.
Does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Tammera.
The study I was looking at this morning that I sent over to Kathy is talking about the importance of teaching children to breathe for their health. So, you know, I know she does music, and so many other people do. And that's part of what we're losing, is that moment, not only the moment of pause, but taking in the breath. And she talks people through that process in the book.
Breathing is good.
That's also very vital in my field in psych. Yeah, because that's what we really push about, is doing the breathing techniques and exercises. There's a lot of different ones to help you get through anxiety and panic disorders, and then to learn how to rewire your brain to not have it instantly become a fight or flight response, but to come from the cortex and work its way down. And you do that with practice through breathing.
And we found some fantastic studies on light, green light, and how it helps not only with migraines, but reducing anxiety that's coming out of the University of Stanford in California. And so we're sharing that information also on things that people can do.
Where are you
That's
at,
very
Tammera? Where do you
interesting.
currently
That's
practice
good to know.
I live on a remote ranger station in Southern Cascades. So I'm about, give or take, as the bird flies, about 25 miles from the north entrance of Crater Lake National Park. So for 20 years, I drove 120 miles a day through the Umpqua National Forest, down the most beautiful river in the world, and I can say that because I've seen a lot of rivers, to Roseburg, where I worked in a clinic with people with all kinds of chronic conditions. My first medical oversight was a psychiatrist who had worked in, built hospitals in Africa, and then had worked in the prison systems in Kentucky, and went, you know, I'm never going to get people well until I start working on what's going on in their heads. And so he changed his direction and became a psychiatrist, a brilliant man. Unfortunately, he's deceased now, and I learned so much from him. And then from there, I have been mentored and mother-henned by nurse practitioners, and they've been my medical oversight. And the body of information from nurse practitioners always amazes me, because, you know, people go, oh, it's just a nurse. I'm just seeing the nurse. And it's like, no, honey, you want to see the nurse, because the doctor don't know diddly compared to her. So, you know, we got to work with a lot of amazing things. We did a vitamin D study with over 600 patients and found that, you know, injectable vitamin D put people into a euphoric state, especially if they had manic issues, And then once we got them into those optimum ranges, their incidences of episodes dramatically decreased. They went through the winter months much more stable than they did at other times with just standard medications. So that's what I did. Then I began teaching. I taught for Portland Community College in their nutrition program. I was lead instructor for 4 years. And this year I'm focusing on writing a book with Kathy.
I asked because I do manual lymph drainage. So a lot of people who suffer from primary lymphedema also have severe food needs that go behind they need support with. So I'm going to look at the book and get as much information from you as I can. I wish you were still around here working though.
So I do work with people virtually, and I make myself available for nurses. Just if you have questions, I make myself available to help however I can.
All right, thank you.
Right.
So on that
Do you
note,
want to
Christy,
talk about your online course?
sure. Through my website, yourwholenutrition.com, we've got tons of articles that you can read and resources. And then in January, we launched our course for nurses, designed for nurses, but anybody can take it. And so there's over 30 videos. There are live sessions like we're doing right now, where I really dig into the science on stuff. And then I bring in a lot of history, because I'm a history nut too, as well as basic home economic stuff that some people learned in the 40s and 50s and 60s in high school that hasn't been taught since 1980. And so there's those, things on what kind of butcher paper do I buy, and why should I wrap up meat in paper instead of plastic, information. So you can access that at any time. It's $197, and there are tons of resources. You get both of the books digitally in the course, and we will also, once we complete Empty Plate, it is the textbook for the course, and it will be included in the material also.
This is that backwards evolution she talked about before. She developed the course, which was fabulous and assiduously researched, and then called me up about this book, and she says, well, I have all this stuff. It kind of makes sense to make a textbook. I said, yeah, it kind of does. So backwards evolution or not, I think it's the right way to go.
And it reads very easy. I enjoyed, what you have sent me. I really enjoyed reading it. And there's lots of little sections out of there that I was like, oh, I should talk about this and I should talk about that. It reads well. It reads well.
Yeah,
Thank you for that, Jen. I know that Tam's prior book, I reviewed Tam's prior book, and I fell in love with it. And it has a much more, I don't know, want to say conversational style or flavor. But my publications at the beginning of this book are all very academic. They're research articles, they're chapters in textbooks, whatever, and they're all written in a very kind of dry and not so enjoyable, if you will, way to present the material. And so it's been kind of this fun little yin and yang between me and Tam, because Tam has a writing style that's really enjoyable and conversational, and I keep pulling back and going, okay, we're not writing a memoir, we're not writing a magazine article, we really have to bring the science in here, and we have to, so it's, we're trying to make it palatable and not textbook-y, but very, very rigidly supported by research and recent science. Not just 6,000-year-old Ayurveda, which is still very valid, but what makes it valid is that recent science keeps validating it.
And from my world in holistic nutrition, we're really emphasizing the science, and we have to justify everything we do with science in my profession to a degree that other dietitians might not have to, because we're always being told, oh, there's no science to support that. And we're like, really? Look at this. We've got all this that we can show you. And, that's what ties us together. And one of the reasons why my tagline is where tradition meets science is because there's so much knowledge we had, and we've lost a portion of it, we've forgotten a portion of it. And when we listen to these anecdotal, quaint little stories about this or that, we go, oh, isn't that sweet, but there's no science to support it. Now Kathy and I are saying, oh yes, there is. There is science to support that grandma was right, or that the Native Americans were right in what they did. They didn't have the science to tell you the chemical breakdown of these herbs or these bitters, or why you want everything to be cooked. Now we have the technology to provide the science to show you that they were right and we are wrong.
So I just have a comment and a question. For years, public health has understood the principle of setting the family table and how it reduces recidivism, it reduces dropouts, it reduces all kinds of different things. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. And that's the comment. And then the question is your book going to have pictures?
Yes. Yes, many pictures.
Okay.
If the book will be available online and in print. Online, all the pictures are in color. We're not quite so sure about that in print just yet, but we do have lots of fabulous pictures. Not the least of which are some of Tam's amazing plate collection. The name of the book is Empty Plate. So we have so the right words, Tam, who are our artists, people, media people who are developing the evolution of a plate with nothing on it to a plate that's full, we hope, by the end. But there are beautiful pictures of plates and pieces of pottery, and how the pattern on the plate is significant, and how when you eat, you reveal the pattern on the plate, and all of that. So yes, there are really beautiful images.
We've had to actually kind of rein ourselves in, because
Yes,
we both
we
can
have.
be can be magpies. Ooh, color, picture. So we wanting to make sure that the images add to the story we're telling, not just a pretty picture on the page. So, and all of the hyperlinks for the science are going to be live in the digital copies, just like they are in my previous two books. We can't do that, of course, with the print books. They're going to be in print, but in the digital, all you have to do is click on the hyperlinks and it takes you to the studies.
Great. Well, this has been a wonderful education and great conversation. And I can see I would love to have you come back and talk more about Ayurveda, and about maybe have even a larger question forum, because it seems like people have health issues that they would like to talk to you about, Tammera. So I would like to thank you both very much for being here. And this is great information, and I really enjoyed it. Does anybody else have any other questions or anything else they'd like to say before we close?
Thank you, Jan, for the invitation.
Okay.
The hour did fly by, just like you promised.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to tell everybody, if you like what Dr. Tammera Karr and Kathleen Bell, RN, had to say, you can get in touch with watching this YouTube video, as well as what would be a great way for them to get in contact with you two.
Best way to get in contact with me is through my website, yourwholenutrition.com. And they can see not only our virtual office, our dispensary, but they can access the books, and they can access the online course, and they can email me. Kathy?
And my business name is Northern Light in
Okay.
Oregon. So I do not have a website, but the email for that is kbell, Northern Light at kbell.soft. So if you just, I'm the only Northern Light in Oregon, so just start.
And she's
Hey,
never
Belle.
going to have a website, by the way.
No, I'm never going to have a website, by the way. I will not dedicate enough time in my life to maintaining a website. I don't have enough minutes left.
Thank
And
you,
trust
Jan.
me, it does take a lot of time and energy. Yes, I am finding
I
that out.
absolutely,
Well,
I
thank you
absolutely
again very
believe you.
much. Yes, yes. So it's been a pleasure, and thank you again for tuning in to Positive Live, and I will talk to you all later.